The biggest problem is not only the attack from outside. The biggest problem is that many rulers in the region make it possible in the first place. Because the protection of the attack happens through platforms, cooperation, and silent approval coming directly from within the region itself.
Before we begin, one important clarification. This video is not glorifying violence, and it is not a fund-by analysis for any country. This is not about celebrating anyone or defending anyone blindly. It is an Islamic framing based on facts and visible patterns, meaning what we can all observe without claiming access to secret backroom deals. Because wars are not only fought with rockets, they are fought with logistics, air corridors, military bases, defense systems, and political cover. And that is why the decisive question is not only who fires, but also who makes the entire operation possible in this region. We keep seeing who provides the platform, who tolerates foreign military infrastructure, who repeats and normalizes the narratives, and who suppresses their own people the moment they publicly question these contradictions or remind their rulers that Islam is a standard, not just folklore. And if you widen your lens even more, you begin to see a second layer. The region was historically cut into many small nation-states, its unity was weakened, and its direction was shattered. And the very power blocks that are militarily entrenched in the region today stand in continuity with the forces that made that fragmentation possible in the first place. This is not secret knowledge, it is a pattern. Division creates dependence, dependence creates control, and control is eventually sold as stability. That is what we are talking about today. Not through speculation, but through questions anyone can see, and above all, through an Islamic standard. What does loyalty to the Ummah mean? What does justice mean? And what does betrayal look like when rulers clearly do the opposite? Because if you give up your stance out of comfort, what will you stand before Allah with when He asks, "What did you do within your capacity to command what is right and speak against what is wrong?" You may not control the outcome, but you do control whether you stayed truthful when it was inconvenient. On that day, excuses won't sound like wisdom, they'll sound like surrender. So choose your side now, while choice is still yours. So let your heart stay alive, and let your stance testify for you, not against you. If you look at the situation with clear eyes, there are moments that feel shocking because they are so open. A Muslim country is attacked, it responds, and then you watch other Muslim states actively contribute to intercepting that response, blocking it or neutralizing it. And then it is even presented publicly as responsible, as if it were heroic to preserve order. You do not need to scream here, you only need to ask honestly. What does it mean when Muslim states operationally protect one side that openly pursues its regional objectives, while practically weakening another Muslim side? What does it mean when Muslim rulers do not even remain neutral, but become part of a protection architecture that is positioned against Muslims? And more importantly, this is not a blanket accusation against entire populations. Peoples are often trapped, dependent, intimidated, or simply not decision makers. This is about rulers, systems, and decisions. Because rulers do not act as private individuals, they represent policy, military direction, and political alignment. And when that alignment visibly runs against Islamic interests, it must be possible to say so without being smeared. What we are witnessing in the region is not only a geopolitical drama, it is a moral exposure. Many rulers do not operate by an Islamic compass, but by a security compass that is set outside the Ummah. And that explains why some states would rather protect the order of the powerful than defend the dignity of the Ummah. Because their stability is tied to that order, their legitimacy is borrowed from it, and their survival often depends on staying useful to it. This is why the issue cannot be reduced to slogans or tribal loyalties. When policies repeatedly align with forces that harm Muslim lands, destabilize the region, and normalize oppression, the question is not who feels offended, but what standard are we using? In Islam, dignity is not a luxury item, and justice is not optional when the cameras are off. If our compass is truly Quran and Sunnah, then clarity is not extremism, it is a form of amana, speaking truth with adab, but without fear. If you want to understand why this protection architecture is so stable, you have to look at the platforms. because from this region, power is projected, controlled, deterred, and bombed. That is not polemics, it is logic. Whoever has bases in a region, integrates air defense, builds intelligence structures, and secures supply lines, has a hand on the switch. And here is the question many avoid because it is uncomfortable. Why do so many Muslim rulers allow foreign military power to be embedded so deeply in the region? Why is it not treated as an existential threat to sovereignty, but as a normal part of stability? Again, we are not claiming to know every hidden document, but we can see outcomes. We can see that this infrastructure is not merely there, it operates in critical moments. It protects alliances, it protects interests, and in the end, it protects an order in which the Ummah is not a priority. And then another painful point becomes obvious. Those who criticize these contradictions often do not get space for debate, they get pressure. Voices are branded as troublemakers, critics are intimidated, and sometimes they are even imprisoned. Meaning, these platforms are not only military, they are also politically and socially secured. The security apparatus does not just protect borders, it protects narratives. It does not only police streets, it polices speech. And once a ruler's survival depends on an external order, silencing internal critique becomes a strategy, because honest debate would expose the cost of those alliances. When you see this pattern, the next question becomes unavoidable. Why do so many rulers in the region act like one bloc? Why does it feel as if they hold the same line, even when that line is morally and Islamically difficult to justify? One answer lies in the brutal reality of power. Many regimes prioritize regime survival over the interest of the Ummah. They fear not only external enemies, but also the moment when their own people see through the game and demand a real standard. Then comes dependence. Whoever relies on external security guarantees, weapon supply, intelligence cooperation, and economic protection always pays a price. And that price is rarely only money. That price is direction. And eventually the direction becomes so normal that it is not even explained anymore, it is simply executed. And here the Islamic framing becomes deeply painful. Islam is not treated as a guiding principle in many of these states, but as a symbolic backdrop. Islam as private spirituality can exist as long as it is not translated into justice, as long as it does not ask why oppression is protected, as long as it does not ask why the Ummah remains fragmented, as long as it does not ask why truth has become dangerous. And when you see how quickly critics are silenced, you realize this is not only politics, it is fear of Islamic accountability. Because an Islam that stays only in ritual is harmless to many systems. An Islam that demands justice is not. That is why the pressure is so intense. Because once people remember that Allah hears, Allah sees, and Allah will call every soul to account, the spell of propaganda breaks. And systems that survive on silence always panic when a community begins to speak. Not with chaos, but with clarity. At this point, the most important question is, what do we do with this as Muslims? Because it helps no one to become furious and then morally rot from within. It helps no one to become cynical and call everything hopeless. And it helps no one to pretend this is merely a complicated game that does not concern us. Islam gives you a standard. Justice is not optional, it is an obligation. Truth is not a mood, it is a responsibility. And loyalty to the Ummah is not nationalism. It is a moral duty that shows itself precisely when it becomes costly. That means, practically, you are not allowed to be naive, but you are also not allowed to think in helplessness. You must learn to recognize patterns, understand causes, and expose the language through which oppression gets normalized. You must understand that many systems in the world are not morally neutral. They are interests poured into institutions. And that is exactly why you must not be trained to believe that silence is maturity and truth is extremism. And while we say this, we repeat, this is not a call to illegal actions. It is a call to clarity, to political awareness, to an Islamic lens that is not driven by fear. Because if rulers betray direction today, that does not mean the Ummah has no truth left. It only means the Ummah must relearn who it follows and why. It means returning to Quran and Sunnah as a compass, not a slogan. It means raising a generation that can't be bought by comfort, can't be intimidated by labels, and can't be manipulated into defending injustice just to feel safe. And it means remembering that Allah never asked you to control outcomes. He asked you to stand with truth. When you put it all together, one sober but powerful conclusion remains. An attack from the outside is terrible, but a system that enables it from within the region is even more dangerous. And that is why we cannot speak only about enemies, we must also speak about complicity, dependence, and betrayal of Islamic principles. We cannot pretend this is normal, while Muslim rulers provide platforms, stabilize protection architectures, and silence critics. And we cannot pretend Islam is only private faith, while the Ummah is kept in political and moral chains, forced to watch injustice be protected, rewarded, and repeated. Because once you normalize it, you stop resisting it. Once you accept it as how the world works, you quietly accept the roads they assigned you, powerless, grateful, and silent. But Islam did not come to make you spiritually numb. It came to make you morally alive, to name oppression for what it is, to refuse double standards, and to remember that dignity is not granted by regimes, but by Allah. In the end, it is not about whether you know every detail. In the end, it is about whether you stay awake, whether you love truth, whether you take justice seriously, and whether you have the courage to keep Islam as your standard, even when the world tries to teach you that compliance is wiser. Because one day, you will not be asked what you felt, you will be asked what you stood for.